One evening, I was out in Lacey, Washington to pick up a handgun that I had recently purchased for protection. Contrary to the pickup status both online and sent to my email, the store didn't have it in stock yet and told me to come back in another week. I lived about an hour from Lacey at the time, and when I had gotten there, evening rush hour was just beginning to become unbearable. I didn't want to drive all the way back home just yet, as it would add an additional hour to my already long commute. Side note, the car that I was driving belonged to my dad, and I was borrowing it until I had enough money saved up for a new car after my beloved Honda had broken down the previous year. I killed some time bumming around the store that I had purchased my firearm from, and then decided to drive over to the nearest coffee shop. It was a newly built cabin-style cafe with a modern twist. The barista handed me my 16-ounce dirty chai, and I walked back out to my car. I then drove to a gas station around the corner, still trying to kill time until traffic thinned out. The car didn't need gas, so I pulled into a parking spot right at the corner of the four-way intersection where the gas station was located. I turned off the engine, stepped outside, and lit a cigarette, leaning against the driver's side door to avoid stinking up the interior. The weather was overcast and drizzly, but not overly cold. It was dusk, and most of the daylight had faded. The stoplights at the intersection were diffused by the late autumn mist, and I watched them flicker from green to yellow to red and black again as the traffic moved in sync with their signals. Zoned out by the lights and generally lost in thought while enjoying my coffee and smoke, I didn't notice the man walking toward me until he was already halfway across the street. He was a white guy of average height and strawberry blonde hair, perhaps in his mid-20s. He definitely hadn't changed his clothes in a while and carried a backpack that I assume held the few belongings that he had. He didn't smell, but he looked raggedy and unkempt. My immediate thought was that drugs were likely part of his lifestyle. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I'm always cautious, having grown up in the suburbs of Seattle. The man finished crossing the street and awkwardly limped toward my car, maintaining eye contact and a strained grin. I locked my car out of caution but remained outside, smoking casually. Normally, I'm a social person, but I don't go out of my way to be unpleasant either. He approached me and stood about 10 feet away when he said hello and asked if I had a light. I hesitated, but saw no harm in fulfilling this very simple request. Taking 2 steps forward, I lit a cigarette, which he held out toward me as he approached. He attempted to make small talk, weaving in hints that he had just gotten off the bus and still needed to go another block down the road. Somewhere in his poorly crafted sob story, he stopped mid-sentence, kind of like a bad actor, and pretended to be struck by an epiphany. "Hey, would you mind just dropping me off down the road? It's not very far." I apologized and said I couldn't help because it was my dad's car, not mine, and I didn't feel comfortable driving it without his permission. A stupid but plausible excuse that I came up with on the spot. Mr. Unkempt did not like my answer, and his smile immediately turned tense and flatlined. Clearly upset, he became more insistent. "It's just down the road," he whined. "My leg is killing me. It wouldn't even be far for you. I'll give you a cigarette." His persistence and sudden burst of hostility made my hair stand on end, and I firmly said, "No, I'm sorry. I can't help you. It's my dad's car, and he's got set rules, all right?" With 10 years of hospitality experience under my belt, I immediately offered him alternative ideas for how he could get to where he needed to be. I even suggested that maybe someone inside the gas station could help him out or call him a ride. Each word I said made him increasingly irate, and he began curling his fingers into fists, not in a threatening way, but like a toddler about to scream bloody murder for not getting their way. He seemed to pause and size me up for a very fleeting moment. I'm small and not at all intimidating physically, so I told him that I hoped he made it home safe, quickly unlocked my car, jumped in and locked myself inside. When I looked up from locking the car door, I saw him speed walking back across the street, heading in the direction that he originally come from. No limp, no awkward walk whatsoever. No distress or pain even showing slightly, just the normal speed walk of a physically well person, a very rage-filled person. I know I had dodged a bullet there, and I felt pretty dumb for hanging around the city after dark alone, and at this point I didn't care about traffic anymore, so I started the engine and hightailed it home in what ended up being an hour and 45-minute drive. But this time the traffic was 100% worth the inconvenience. And PSA, if you haven't heard it enough already, be careful who you give your attention to, especially when you're alone. Stay aware at all times and err on the side of caution, even when strangers seem harmless at first.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
Encounter with a criminal. After searching for a long time, I finally landed a part-time job during the first year of law school. I thought I'd be able to pay my rent on my own now, and they were providing meals for the employees, so I didn't have to worry about that. Moving out isn't as cool as it sounds. It's really hard to survive out there in this brutal world. I learned my lesson on the first day of my job as a pizza delivery guy. After weeks of training, the pizza outlet I was working at decided to send me on a delivery assignment. It was the weekend, and the place is usually a lot more crowded on the weekends. Someone had ordered 13 pizzas from a place that was around 2 kilometers from the pizza outlet. One of my coworkers, Beatrice, said, "Looks like someone's going to have fun on the weekend, unlike us, part-timers." To which I replied, "It's better this way since I'll be getting bored at home anyways." Beatrice told me to be careful and smile while talking to the customers. I took the pizza packages and put them in the delivery vehicle. Pizza delivery bikes are built differently. It has a cubicle box in the backseat area, which is used to keep pizza cartons to make them deliver safely. I opened the location app and took the less traffic route. After 25 minutes I reached the location and I was stunned to see a big beautiful house. There was a huge gate and a lot of flowers near the gate. I stepped down from my bike and went over to ring the intercom bell. As I was about to press the button, the gates opened and a man came out. He looked at me and then looked the other way in a very strange manner. So I said to him, "Sir, this is your paid for order for 13 pizzas under the name of Michael." I tried to smile. I kept waiting for his response, but instead of saying anything, he signaled me to go in. I acted nonchalant and went inside with the pizza boxes. When I entered the house, it had a whole different vibe. There was a bar attached to the living room. There were lots of men and women drinking alcohol and dancing. Loud music was playing on the speakers, so nobody was able to hear me. After shouting 2 or 3 times amid the loud music, I decided to put the pizza boxes on the table near the bar and then go back. When I turned back after putting down the pizza boxes, a pretty woman came and grabbed me. She said, "Care to join us?" I was flustered and irritated at the same time, and I said to her, "No ma'am, I'm a delivery boy. I only came here to deliver the pizzas." She laughed and grabbed my arms tightly and started to walk towards the bar. I said to her, "Ma'am, you look drunk, please let go of my arm." But she didn't listen. I tried to forcefully remove my arm from her grip, and I didn't realize that the music had stopped and everyone was looking at me for being weird and an outsider. That's what I thought before I realized that they were not looking at me, but at the man behind me. A tall man in a white suit came forward and said, "What's the problem here?" I said, "Sir, I'm just a pizza delivery boy and this lady won't let me go." He had a calm demeanor and seemed rich, judging by his clothes and watch. He said, "Let the kid go, Lena." The expression on the woman's face changed. She looked scared and she immediately dropped my hand. I turned back to leave, but then the rich-looking man called me back and saying, "On second thought, I think you should stay. Have a drink, maybe." For some reason, I felt a chill in my body. I couldn't deny him. "Sir, I will lose my job if I don't go back soon," I said hesitantly. After a short pause, he said, "How about I make you an offer? I'll pay you to triple your salary for one job. What do you think, young man?" He added. I nodded yes without making a sound. The woman named Lena took me to a room and then gave me a box and a piece of paper with an address written over it. The tall man was gone by then, and another rough-looking like man came and asked me for my bank details. I gave him my details and walked out with the box in my hand. My message tone beeped. I put the box on the ground and opened the text. It said that $1,000 had been credited to my account. That's when it hit me. My entire body started to shake, and tears started to stream out of my eyes. I was afraid to look at what was inside the box, so I picked it up quickly and put it in the cubicle box on my delivery bike. As I looked at my hands, they were wet with blood. I threw up on the spot, and my heart beat and breathing was just getting faster. Without taking the bike or my phone with me, I ran and just kept running. After a few minutes, I started to hyperventilate and fainted just there on the ground. When I came to my senses, I saw an old man holding a water bottle. He probably tried to help me while I was laying unconscious on the ground. He was asking me questions or maybe telling me something. Couldn't focus on a word he said, and I took the water bottle from his hands, and just after a few minutes after pouring the water on my head, I asked him where I was and where the nearest bus stop was. The old man told me that it was just 200 meters away, so I thanked him for his help. I went over to the bus stop and took a bus to go home. My phone and delivery bike were never found, and I got fired from my job, and then I also had to compensate for the bike. 5 years later, I'm now working as a lawyer, and I'm always aware of all sorts of criminal activities happening around me, as well as trying to bring justice to evil and good. I never talked about the incident to anyone, but I know that if I ever face the devil, I will not shake anymore.
Two nights ago, I was awoken by my dog between 11 and 3 a.m. at most. He kept near me when I finally got up and made a low, aggressive growl facing out of my room, but kept close to me. He's never done this before. I've worked with canines for years. They gave me a gut feeling, and then I heard it. Someone talking. In my dad's yard, no more than 20 feet by the sound. Low mumbling or bad whispering. I was blaring Return of the King, yes, the extended version. I need to add that I have childlike hearing for my age for context. If you speak in one floor home with two doors closed at a whisper, I can make out the words. He went quiet when I opened a drawer too loud to grab my .38 special, chambered around and noticed a shadow passing by a light outside the blurred window. Home was clear, all doors locked. Nothing odd, but my dog peeled out. I held my flashlight in one hand, went his way and called him to the other side. He was gone. I guess they knew I was home and ran on foot. I went around but thought, okay, I'm good. Well, Florida continues to be Florida. Night 3. My dog does this again in the same frame, waking me up, and at this rate, I just got the 12 gauge. My dog was acting far more protective and gave me the dog body language for major threat, need the pack, can't handle alone. I froze for a moment. 2 people now? This is not good. They must intend to violently take whatever they could be after. It was one new guy and guy 1 from yesterday. I can't risk getting a look. At this rate, they mean business and had to be armed to scope out a place with a Ring camera, 60 pounds of muscle dog, and my grown self with a lifetime of handling weaponry. In the yard around 2:30 a.m. for a second night, they knew I and my dog were home but clearly had a goal. This time, voices were behind the home. My dog then pulled a freaking Leroy Jenkins. He gave one of the most aggressive, loud barks I'd ever heard of any dog do and ran to the wall. I ran to his side, getting him hyped up, yelling, "Mess him up, they're dead men." Now things are clicking for me. This was planned and professional. I checked every inch of the property with the shotgun. My dog was worked up and spooked, but calming to be with. I'm buying a mistake for this one, and a good one. I went inside. I literally kept that gun on me and chambered and in reach of my bed, and I barely slept. Day 4. I did a bit of looking around for misplaced or slightly moved objects or scratched up locks. Yep. One trash can by the gate was rotated 180 degrees, with the handle facing me and not the wall as it always been placed. A few crushed dead twigs as I went back. The head chair was turned to move to the right. A clearly odd thing is that table is set symmetrically so it's glaringly obviously out of place if you live there. The Ring camera system and my neighbors so far show nothing, but I knew these guys had to have known that my dad was gone. They knew his son lives there, that the dog would eat them and is huge, that I had a gun, and I even announced that it was armed. Yet they came back with backup. Then the dude came back up, move stuff I didn't know till my maritime buddy told me to check if such and such a rock was out of place. It's a way to gauge the person's awareness and presence, I guess. Whatever their goal was, I don't care. I just want them to know if they come back again, I'll be strapped to the gills. I'm originally from Belarus, although I live in the United States now. I got my first job under the table in the early mid-90s. I was 12 to 13 and my job was being a helper in my father's barber shop, mostly sweeping up hair, cleaning the bathroom, taking out trash, that sort of thing. We lived, along with our shop, near the border with Poland. Lukashenko had just come to power and the Soviet Union had dissolved. These were very difficult times for everyone. Mass starvation and poverty swallowed the land. In fact, these problems still exist there today. But back to the story. I was at the barbershop with Papa, and we only really get the same few regulars since most people cut their own hair or have a family member do it. Maintaining a barbershop was really one of the only things possible during the Soviet Union. The day goes by and it's beginning to get dark. I'm told to clean up the shop, take out the trash, and then to come right home. After being lectured, Papa leaves me alone in the barbershop to go drink by myself somewhere. I finish my chores, I lock the door, and finally begin walking home. Now, this is a pretty rural area, not exactly like the countryside, but everything is very spaced out. Hard to maintain a community around here, so everyone sort of sticks to their own privacy. As I'm walking home, I realize that I forgot to take out the garbage, and I turn around to go back. When I turn around, I suddenly noticed a LADA, a rather popular Russian vehicle, had been driving behind me with no lights on. Actually, I believe they were coasting as there was no sounds of the engine humming and we were also going slightly downhill. Since I'm going back my route, I'm now going uphill and the car passes me by and I feel somewhat at ease. Suddenly, the Lada gets to the bottom of the hill, cranks the engine on and makes a U-turn. They pull up beside me and I can see that it's a man and a woman inside. The man driving asks me if I want to lift to my location, but I tell them no thanks, that it's not far and that, well, they are severely creeping me out. They get offended that I told them they are creeping me out and begin to yell at me, calling me all sorts of nasty things, telling me they hope I slip and crack my head open. Figuring they were possibly just drunk, I tell them to F off and cut through the grass and trees and I get off the road. I take a shortcut through this little wooded area that eventually will link back to the street on the other side, but by that point, some time should pass. Yet when I get there, the Lada from before is now idling on the road. I won't lie, at this point I'm getting extremely agitated. I come from a home with an alcoholic father and was sort of a Slav squat. I was quite used to confronting adults, and with my attitude, it also meant that I'd been getting beaten by adults as well, so these random people acting all tough didn't scare me so much. I know it's edgy, but I don't know. You get used to it. You can read a person on whether or not they're actually going to attack a child or not, and you'd be surprised by how many actually do. Filled with anger, I walk up directly to the car and ask the man, "Hey, what, you following me? You like me or something? You want me, huh? You want a kid? Why don't you go F your sister or whatever that is in there with you? Why don't you leave me alone?" The man pauses for a second and puts his hand up to the window, holding a gun or something that looks like a gun. It was dark and I couldn't see very well, and he says, "You can either have a good night or your last. If you get in the car, we can drive around a bit, have some vodka, have some fun. But if you don't, I'll kill you right here." Ironically, while I've been in fistfights with adults before, I've never been confronted with a gun. I don't know what to do at this point, but I know that there's no way I'm getting in this freak's car, and I hesitate for a moment before I say, Okay, I'll get in, and act like I'm going along with the plan. I go to the passenger side and the woman gets out to let me in. I believe she was going to say something like, "Good boy," but as she got out of the car, I kicked her in the leg as hard as I could and started running. She yelped and fell over, and by the time they knew what happened, I was back in the trees. It was a circular wooded area that was surrounded by roads, sort of like a large roundabout, but I could get to the center where they couldn't see me. They want to know which side I would come out on, so I sit and wait in the middle for a while before deciding enough time had passed and I come out the side nearest the barber shop. I sprint from the woods up the road into the shop. I unlock the door, jump inside, lock the door, and stay there for the entire night. In the morning, my father showed up to the shop and beat me for never coming home. I tried to explain what happened with the kidnapped attempt and even tried describing the car, but he got even angrier. He just accused me of lying, saying that I was using what I saw on the news to make up a lie. Yeah, by the way, this is unfortunately common. Not an everyday thing, but it got to the point that reported kidnappings were as common as car break-ins in America, if you want a comparison. Apparently, these two had gone around the whole village, asking any kids they saw if they wanted a lift, and there were reports of them making threats, etc. The exact profile of what happened to me. After my experience, I paid close attention to the news in hopes of these people getting caught, but instead, I only read headlines about children going missing, and how there was an abundance of missing kids from the past few months. It was assumed that the children had their organs harvested or were trafficked to other countries or were killed and eaten in response to the mass starvation. Unless you were like my family or were relatively wealthy by the standards of the day, it was very likely that you didn't eat much, if at all.
Years ago, man, I'm old, but let's say the mid-1990s. I worked as a Woodland firefighter while in the Army Reserves. I worked as a spotter, basically being stationed in a giant fire tower in the middle of a national park. My job was just as it sounds. I would use binoculars and look out for fire smoke and other telltale signs of fire. My nearest compadre was 5 miles or so from me. My days consisted of working my shift, taking long walks around the fire tower, being on the lookout for anyone who might be having illegal fires, looking out for wildlife, and staying afoot of bears and wolves. The way our shifts worked back then was 1 week on, 1 week off, so we slept in the towers and cooked our food, etc. One day on one of my tracks out for food in my Jeep, I came across an illegal bear trap. I had several ranger friends with me, and I safely set off the trap, then picked it up to take to the ranger station. Poaching is illegal in the park, and carried a big fine even back then, and some jail time. But it didn't stop the poachers from trying. I heard rifle shots, and headed back for my fire tower. And we did have a rifle in the tower, but only to be used in case of emergency. A few months back, a fellow spotter had been mauled to death by a grizzly, so each tower had been outfitted with a rifle. I looked with my binoculars, but didn't see anything out of the ordinary, so I radioed my coworker Ben, who was an older guy in the adjacent tower, and he hadn't heard anything, but had come across a few traps himself. That night, after dinner of frankenbeans and toast, I was riding to my future wife, when I heard the rumbling of a truck, thinking it was maybe Ben. Occasionally he made the trek over and we would crack open a soda and chew the fat for a bit. It wasn't. Instead, I saw 4 men with rifles get out of the truck, one looking around and leaning up against the truck, whilst the other 3 grabbed traps and began to set them. I grabbed a rifle and my lantern and headed down the stairs. I was only 21 at the time, a farmer's son from a rural Virginia farming town. And even with 1 deployment behind me, I was naive. I should have called it into the Rangers, but instead, I thought I could talk some sense into our 4 dangerous men. I barely got a "hey, what are you doing" out of my mouth before I was roughly shoved by bare hands. My lantern fell, and I heard it crack. Then my rifle was kicked away from me. I felt the breath leave my chest when I was violently kicked in the stomach. I barely had caught my breath when I was grabbed by 2 of the men and was shoved forward into the woods. It seemed like we walked for miles, but in reality, it was probably only a mile. However, I noticed that there was no sounds in the forest, and it is rarely silent. It's usually a cacophony of sounds, even at night, owls, wolves, and crickets. But on this night, nothing. Suddenly, I was shoved onto my knees, and I felt hot tears well up. Thought of my parents, my little sister, brother, and my fiance who were back home in Virginia. When I heard the rack of a gun, I shut my eyes and prayed. Then suddenly, the night erupted. But it was the sounds of sirens, those of forest rangers, and behind them in his pickup, Ben, who had tried to radio me that he had heard a car's engine and come to my tower when I hadn't replied. The poachers were arrested. Ben drove me back to the tower, and I was still shaking. He didn't lay into me for not following the procedure, but just said that it was a close kid. I ended up leaving the job months later to take a job closer to home, but I never ran into any more poachers during the rest of my time. I kept in contact with Ben for a while and sent him a wedding invite and a photo of my firstborn son in 1997. However, as time usually does, we lost track of one another. And a few years back, I Googled him to discover he'd passed away a few years back. He would have been 75 or so. I don't know whatever came of those poachers, but I know I never want to meet them again.